Hello everyone. Let's talk about primary keys. So let me set this up for you. What you see here on the screen is you see a simple script that I wrote that creates a table called employees. Now first it drops a table called employees, then it creates a table named employees. A pretty simple script. Now, when you're just starting writing scripts or database programs, you need to know a couple of things. One of the things is, remember, what a table does in a database is it just holds rows and columns of data. Now, of course, it gets a little bit more complicated than that, but at its core, really that's all a table does. It holds data kind of like an Excel spreadsheet. Now, I know I'm being overly simplistic. If you have experience working with databases, you say, Bob, I know it's more complicated than that, and I get it, but this is kind of a beginner sort of a lesson here. But anyway, so when you create a table here, we have an employee table, and it has two columns. It has a column called emp ID, and it has a column called emp name. So there's your emp ID, there is your emp name. Now, the thing is when you create database tables, database tables don't have any intelligence in them. Like, for example, here for the employees, I could put in, employee ID 1, employee name Bob, right? It would work just fine. Not a trick question. You would write a SQL insert, insert into employees values 1 and Bob. So what? But the thing is if you don't specify what the rules are for a table, like for example, when I say rules, I'm talking about a concept in databases called constraints. Now that's a big term, constraints. What constraints do is constraints allow us to specify what is valid data and what is not within tables. Now, there are different kinds of constraints. The constraint I'm going to show you here is called a primary key. It's a very simple constraint, and it's the easiest to understand. As I was talking about in my example before, I can insert multiple employee IDs 1, Michael Jordan, employee ID 1, Bob, employee ID 1, Mickey Mouse. Now you think about it, you're like, wait a second, you're going to have duplicates now for the employee ID. And what I say is exactly. So what we need to do when we build the tables, we need to specify that. Like, for example, in this case, we need to say employee ID can happen once and only once, right? Like a social security number, a driver's license number, student ID, employee ID, you kind of get it, where you don't want to allow duplicates. Now, to do that in a table is we put in a constraint called a primary key, and it looks like this. It's that simple. Now, there are different kinds of primary keys. When you go into database programming in more depth, you're going to learn all about them. There's a lot more to learn about primary keys, but this is just the basics. So when I do this and I say just primary key, what this will allow now, or what this will do is it will not allow duplicate values for the employee ID. So if I insert, with the SQL statement, insert, values 1 Bob, 1 is used, so I cannot use 1 anymore. So primary key and constraints in general are more of a design thing. It's like, what do you want to do? It's do you want to allow duplicates or not allow duplicates? In this case, what we're saying here is we don't want duplicates allowed. So let me just make sure that my syntax is correct. I'll do a quick run. I'll run my script. Again, this just builds the table. And I should get table dropped. That's right, because I have an employees table and table created. Now, I'm not going to test this. I'm going to leave it up to you to do so. Now, you should know how a SQL insert works by now. If not, let me know, and I could, show you how one works. But if you insert now a row into this table, you can only use an employee ID once. If you want to reuse it, you'd have to delete the original row and then, with that employee ID number and then add one again. So that concludes my short lesson on using a primary key constraint. So thank you for listening, and I wish you all a very well rest of the day. Thank you.